You're listening to Reimagining Learning. It's a different world now. The fourth episode in the How to Manage the Modern Workforce, Maximizing Employee Experiences and Productivity podcast series, produced by Aberdeen and brought to you by SAP. In our previous episode on experience management, we learned that HR leaders leveraging employee benefits that boost employee morale and streamline internal processes achieve far superior results than those that don't. This discussion, hosted by Omer Mankara, VP and Principal Analyst at Aberdeen, featuring special guests from SAP SuccessFactors, Margit Bauer, Director of Solution Marketing for Learning, and Matt Pruett, Senior Solution Advisor for Learning, will dive deeper into recent trends and best practices in employee learning. And now your host, Omer Mankara.
Great. Thank you, Jess. And hi, everyone. Welcome to our conversation today, again on Learning Reimagined, where we're going to really talk about some of the best practices and the recent trends as it relates to employee learning. Now, very excited to have our conversation today, both with Margit and Matt. And once again, Margit and Matt, welcome to our conversation. So with that, as we get things started, one of the things that I want to talk about is, what are some of the high-level trends that seem to be influencing HR executives, the HR leaders out there, and their learning programs? A lot has changed, right? Since the past year, even the past 6 months or so, a lot has changed in the world. But as things change in the business landscape, companies were trying to adapt to the new ways of doing business. For some organizations, they've seen an increase in buyer demand. For some, they've seen a decrease. Others, they've seen a change in resources. So a lot of companies have seen different fluctuations in their business activities, and their responses were in line with that. So one of the things that we were curious about as part of our HR, HCM, human capital management related research within Aberdeen was how are the HR leaders responding to those changes? What are those change factors and how do they respond to that? So for that, we've surveyed several hundred HR leaders. That was a global survey, and we included companies around the world, companies of all different sizes. So we don't really get insights from one industry versus the other. We do want to have a macro level view of what are the best practices and changes. So a couple of things that came to light out of that survey was number one, when we asked our participants on what are they doing to manage the effects of the pandemic and how that's influencing their business activities, what they told us was they're reevaluating their talent management, talent acquisition, talent management decisions, and how that feeds into their learning programs. Do we have the right talent with the right knowledge, the right skill sets? If not, how do we upskill them? Also, how do we bring in new talent if there's a demand for more company products and services and we have a shortage of employees? How do we bring the right talent in and onboard them? Another one was utilizing data. So there's a lot of data, as we know, within the business across different silos, and HR leaders are able to access them, but it seems like they do have some challenges as far as integrating that data to find out how effective are learning programs as far as different KPIs goes across different business departments. So we'll talk about all those, along with making sure that the learning and development programs, the L&D programs, are flexible. We'll talk about remote work shortly, but that piece is also critical. The flexibility piece is really become a cornerstone for a lot of companies' ability to adapt, because if organizations are not flexible around employee schedules and employee availability, it becomes harder to operate and address also the flexible buyer demand. Which, by the way, gets us into, as I said, the remote learning and remote work conversations. So as part of our surveys over the past several years, we've been asking several data points to HR, but also different business leaders. So when we looked at the data points from HR leaders and looked at their adoption of remote work capabilities, we found that as of mid-2019, only 19%, so call it 20%, only 19-20% of organizations were using remote work capabilities. Fast forward mid-2020, that has increased to 54%. So it just about tripled in just about a year. Now, early 2021, mid 2021, I think we're going to be reaching the rates of about 60 to 70% or somewhere in that range. But those are some huge jumps. You don't quite often see such increased adoption of any capability. And that's why the flexibility component was critical, as per our earlier conversation point, as employees are working remotely. They don't have the luxury, they don't have the ability to now come into an office and learn from their peers, to go into a classroom environment in an office or elsewhere to learn. So learning programs need to adapt. So we've asked the follow-on question to our participants and asked them, what kind of training and learning programs are you delivering? How do you deliver them? So one of the most popular ways to deliver learning and training programs, even today, is on-the-job learning. Now, with that being said, notice that this doesn't mean on-site learning. Obviously, for some industries, healthcare, manufacturing, some employees will need to go on site, but for many, the world was able to adapt to digital transformation rather quickly. Not because it was such a big challenge, but because the pillars were already there. It was just requiring a change in mindset. So now, what HR leaders brought in was bringing in online or on-the-job learning to an online environment. As employees are doing their jobs remotely, they're able to use communication platforms, tools to be able to communicate with their peers, communicate with their supervisors, to learn as they do their jobs. Skills and competency assessments are still critical because as business requirements change, you want to know as a business, what skill sets do you have today? How do they need to evolve? And you launch, again, that tailored learning and development programs that are increasingly digital. And one of the other data points we also asked to our participants in the survey was, how are the leaders in the business encouraging employees to become more engaged? So one of the ways was providing employees with career paths. So acknowledging employees that they still have a role in the business, even though business priorities are changing, the kinds of products and services that the company may be selling, or the mix of that may be changing, still providing employees a platform where they can see a future for themselves and leverage learning and development for that. So with that, we've gone through some of the changes happening in the world. We talked about remote work. We talked about increased use of online learning. I do want to come to you here first, Margit, and then to you, Matt. What do you see as some of the changes happening today out there, maybe different than 2 years ago or even earlier? Are some of the changes that we've highlighted in line with what you're seeing happening in the marketplace?
Thank you, Omer. Yes, those findings, I would say, resonate well with what we hear as well. So, and it's an interesting question, which brings us right to the heart of the topic of this Learning Reimagined podcast. Because what I get to hear a lot is that learning agility has never been more important, as the COVID-19 crisis has forever changed, I would say, the pace of digital transformation in the learning and development space. When businesses' needs and focus areas shifted overnight, as we all know, and in-person training was also no longer allowed. What we get to hear is that companies that had a digital reskilling and upskilling framework in place were really at a distinct advantage. So while technology has been changing the way we live, communicate, educate, and learn already over the years, the COVID-19 crisis accelerated that speed of adoption a lot. And we have several customers who worked out a remote and digital learning strategy, including establishing the right content, because this is also very important. Content like how to lead remote teams. So they did this not within months and years, as we all have been used to, but within weeks. And it's not just that many more organizations offer learning now as virtual learning. Companies in general think about new ways of learning, like learning in the flow of work, using new technologies, being able to really support different learner needs, or to offer more self-directed development options to their employees. All of that to efficiently support upskilling and reskilling of the workforce in fast pace, but also substantially, and to keep engagement high. Because after all, learning is still quite often disconnected from how and where work gets done. Matt, what do you think here? What changes do you see?
Yeah, thanks, Margit. I'm hearing some of the same things, Margit. I echo your comments. The trends that Omar was mentioning earlier really resonate with what I've seen in my customers. I'm hearing the need for being flexible and adapting to change quickly is really paramount to all of the organizations that I deal with. And I've seen a lot of the organizations really doubling down when it comes to learning and development. They're really focused on increasing their bench strength and keeping their current skills up to date for their staff. I've also been hearing things like training's wasn't really aligned very well to their employee needs, and they wanted to have better experiences for their users. They wanted the experience to be more personalized and relevant, and they were trying to make really good informed decisions, but didn't have the data to do so. So to your point, Omar, earlier, the data utilization was not there, and they needed to get better with that, and they needed all of the learning to be integrated within the suite. So they realized really quickly over the past year that they need to change from a more formalized approach to pivot and change and provide more options online and to provide more modalities and more programs that meet their end users' population. So looking for more ways to personalize that training and looking for more ways to best fit those different learning styles for their learners. I'm also hearing some things about learners and organizations wanting to have more consumer grade type experiences like we would experience today with either Netflix or Amazon. And so making those experiences more relevant and personalized to best fit those needs of the organization.
Great, thank you both, and great insights, Margit and Matt, as far as some of the changes that are happening, and as we heard from both of you, very much in line with some of what our survey data has shown us. And I do want to go back to that notion of remote learning. As I mentioned early on, we've seen an increase in adoption of remote work capabilities to the tune of more than 3 times year over year. So clearly, there's a big trend. Obviously necessitated by the pandemic, but I don't think we're going to see that go away anytime soon, just because employees are now finding more ways to become more productive, and employers are now able to find more ways to keep their employees engaged. But with that being said, we do see a lot of organizations trying to get more creative as far as how do they deliver learning and training programs in a remote environment. So I guess going back to you here first, Matt, and then Margit, also interested to get your thoughts and some of your observations as well. What are some of the creative ways you've seen HR leaders adapt their learning programs so that they're really providing employees the maximum benefits out of remote learning?
Yeah, thanks, Omar. One example that I have is Sacramento County. Obviously, the state of California had a pivot. They actually mandated that all their public sector entities digitize their learning within the year 2020. So the county really needed to think about the way they provided training. Obviously, they did a lot of instructor-led training face-to-face. And they were existing SuccessFactors SAP customer that was using our LMS, and they really wanted a way and a solution that could be implemented quickly, that would replace some of their face-to-face training, but also be flexible enough to meet really all the requirements of the state. So you had state employees that were working from the office that moved to remote offices. You had state employees that were in the office that are now working from the field each day. So they really wanted to design a program that would be implemented countywide, that would include a kind of a replacement for all their instructor-led training, that would move it to video-based or online books or audio books with some practice labs. So they really kind of included everything and packaged it all together. They built out all these amazing career path programs that were personalized and focused and had some smart recommendations built in. So when I went in, if I had a certain role, it would say, hey, you're in this role, so now you might want to move through this path to get you to the next level of the role. Then the solution was really designed around the user. It helped identify all the critical skill gaps that they had. It helped engage their learners in ways that they have never been engaged before. And it also helped them provide guidance and data to support all their strategic initiatives. So that's just one example that I have. I know Margit probably has another one as well. So Margit, you want to talk about yours?
Yes, thank you, Matt. And indeed, an interesting example. As COVID-19 has created such a dramatic level of change that we've never experienced before. I personally have often been fascinated that some companies even switch their complete business model. I mean, I've heard about a company that switched short term from making whiskey to making hand sanitizers. Amazing. And of course, this led to the high need to upskilling and reskill their workforce. Examples I've heard about how organizations support the change learning needs went from sometimes smaller actions like creating new micro learnings to roll out security instructions in fast pace, up to including employee experience surveys. Something what we did at SAP to ask employees real time about how they feel and what they need, also when it comes to learning needs, right? Maybe not so creative as such, but very important and effective. And as I said earlier, we have heard of many customers who adjusted their processes and tools in record time. Like, for example, the University Tech de Monterrey, who switched to virtual learning for their 150,000 students in just 1 week. I mean, that is amazing. And it works. We have been so impressed by our customers that we have put together several customer stories, like the one from this university, to showcase to other customers what customers did to succeed using our solutions. Because as you said, Omer, earlier, the change is here to stay. So anybody who is interested in getting some insight into those customer stories, just check out our SAP Webcom site and get some insights into what customers did. Back to you, Omer.
Great. Thank you, Margit and Matt. Again, great examples and insights. And, I think a lot of what you shared are also great examples of the agility to adapt, right? So it's not just best practices, but how it reflects that innovative mindset on how companies are able to utilize those digital capabilities to help employees adapt to the changing requirements of the new ways of doing business. So with that, as we see companies adapt their learning and training programs, one of the things that we realize also is, again, through our surveys, that they're leaning on analytics a lot more heavily than they ever did before. Now, many reasons for that, but primarily, organizations do want to make sure that they're using the right learning and training programs for employees. Instead of having one program and wish that works for every single employee, they try to tailor that based on different employee skills, based on different employee experiences. But another thing that we realize as part of our analysis is that AI adoption, artificial intelligence capabilities adoption, is trending very highly over the past several months and years. Again, a lot of reasons for that. The popularity of AI is one, but the reality is companies are now finding more practical use cases of using those AI capabilities. So using machine learning, for example, you're now able to find out what kind of learning and training program correlates best with better performance results. Then you can build workflows with the help of AI and deliver automated suggestions for employees to complete learning and development programs based on what their performance looks like or based on the priorities of the business. So there's a lot of that going on as priorities by HR leaders today. So with that being said, going back to here, Margit and Matt, I'm also interested to get your thoughts, but with you, Margit, first, what are your suggestions for our listeners today to implement as it relates to their learning programs? What role do you see AI play to get the most out of their learning and training program initiatives?
Well, first of all, Omer, I would like to confirm what you said, that analytics, either if they are insights into real-time employee feedback or deeper data analysis or even up to predictive modeling of business decisions, that they that the importance has absolutely increased and can be an enabler to lift learning to the next level. So that's absolutely key, I would say, in also in the future. And I also strongly believe, as companies continue to face change and disruption, that the importance of learning and to be able to drive and foster a lifelong learning culture will also stay business critical. And I think organizations need to support their people every step of the way, which includes delivering personalized and relevant learning opportunities and experiences that will empower employees to be successful. I mean, while digital and virtual learning will stay relevant, that's for sure, I think it becomes even more important to foster an environment where people can collaborate and share knowledge to build up skills quickly. On top of that, organizations need to enable learners that they easily can find and consume learning content on any device. Because placing learning in the immediate context of employees' day-to-day activities, this will really help to create stronger collaboration and to increase workplace productivity. I mean, that's what we call supporting learning in the flow of work. So this will be certainly a key factor. But also organizations support a multimodal approach to learning in order that learners can watch, read, listen, or practice along learning journeys so that they also get guidance to consider their preferences. And when we talk about personalization, many think this is about having a home page in place. And this is certainly important, a home page which is personalized based on the learner's interest and behaviors. But also, as you mentioned, Omer, AI-driven capabilities. Because with that, as an organization, you are able to push recommendations like peer-to-peer recommendations, but even go beyond that by, for example, push recommendations like personalized, re-engaged emails, which then feature targeted content recommendations automatically to inactive learners who have not accessed their homepage or content for a specific period of time. So there are many efficient ways which organizations can leverage to encourage their learners in order that they achieve their goals. And finally, what I also would like to mention, because I think this is also very important and even getting more important, is the intersection of talent and learning. Because organizations require increased talent visibility and mobility regardless of economic climate. A talent marketplace helps employees to find the best possible work or opportunity for the skills they have or the skills they want. Managers to find the best possible talent for the work they have. And organizations to gain visibility into the capabilities and interests of their workforce. And of course, learning, including experiential learning, is a big piece of it, as gaining skills is much more than just training or getting a certification. When we think about other opportunities to gain skills like coaching, working on projects, pursuing fellowship, etc. So sorry for my long answer, but there's so much good things which are on the horizon to really help organizations to support new ways of learning. So Matt, with that, what do you get to hear when talking to your customers?
Thanks, Margit. Yeah, that was a great answer. Obviously, I'm going to be brief here because you've covered a lot of it. The reality is that investing in your team really pays off, and having a smart, intelligent system, intelligent learning system will help drive that payoff. And AI obviously is built into our systems. It really allows our users to get content pushed to them automatically. It recommends the best content that's based on their role. It also recommends content based on their future roles. It allows them to take paths that maybe they didn't even know about before. Also, there's some things called peer-to-peer recommendations. So if I know something that's relevant to someone that's in my role, I can recommend those things as well. Or my manager could say, hey, I really think this is something that was important that you should view as well. So all the AI is built into our entire life, right? We're living it on a daily basis, whether it's we're going into Netflix and it's telling us we should watch this movie because we watched this other movie. That is no different when it comes to learning. If I've gone in to take a course, I believe the system should give us something that says, hey, you took this course, so now we recommend you take this additional course because it'll build on those skills. And the recommendations really are here to stay, and AI is built into everything that we do. And expectations from learners are there now. They expect that in their new modern learning system. We're not going to go back to a business as usual. Working remotely has always been around, but it's here to stay now. And the systems need to have that flexibility to drive the users to the content that's really applicable to them and applicable to the organization. And what I'm seeing is some of the most successful organizations have implemented these programs where they allow that personalization to take place, and they allow those learning paths to be created, and they allow the artificial intelligence to recommend different content modalities. And then obviously they use that analytics on the back end to really create those programs that will help drive the business forward.
Great. Thank you for both observations. And Matt, definitely agree with your comments there, by the way. But, remote learning is here to stay. It's going to open up new venues. But even more so, back to our broader conversation with both you, Margit, and Matt, there's a lot of new use cases that HR leaders are now able to incorporate in their learning and development programs. I think the bigger story here is it's all about adaptability. It's all about flexibility. The technology is there. So I definitely recommend our listeners to take a look back at your learning and development program, see how you can incorporate some of the building blocks that we discussed today, be it AI, be it remote learning, be it analytics, to really supercharge your activities to get even better or sustain your great results already. So with that, again, pleasure to chat with you, Margit, and you, Matt. Again, thank you for joining the conversation, and we'll hand it off to our producer.
Thanks for joining us today. Tune into our next episode for a deep dive into 3 key steps to modernize human experience management activities, where we'll summarize the key best practices that we've learned HR leaders should consider using in 2021 and beyond.